G'day folks, Sean here from Air Photography. In today's video, I've got a few tips and tricks for your DJI Mini 3 Pro. These tips are geared to brand new pilots and will help you get the most out of your new equipment. So the first few tips are geared towards the controller. Now the first tip is about getting into some extra settings of the controller. When you launch it, it's going to go right into the Fly app. But if you need to adjust the volume, brightness, or perhaps connect to your Wi-Fi, you do so by swiping down from the top. One swipe will give you that bar along the top to give you some basic information like battery level. But if we do a second swipe, you can see we get this new menu. From here we can enable and disable our Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. We can start a screen recording, we can take a screenshot, and at the bottom here, more importantly, we can adjust the brightness and the volume of the controller. If you need to dive a little bit deeper into settings, we can click on that icon at the top right hand side. And as you can see, that will bring up the rest of the menu options. From there we can manage our Wi-Fi and we can also manage our storage, among many other options. Now the next tip here is about capturing audio with your screen recordings. If you're going to be doing a screen recording, say you want to do some commentary, you can connect a microphone to the DJI RC. The only thing to keep in mind is you must use a USB-C microphone, and you can pick up fairly inexpensive ones on Amazon. This is just a cheap USB-C lavalier type microphone, and it works quite well. If you happen to own something like the DJI wireless microphone system, you can use it in conjunction with the DJI RC as well. Now at the bottom of the RC, you can see we have our main USB-C port. This is used for charging and data transfer if you're connecting it to a computer. To connect a microphone, you want to use that USB-C port that's under the door. Just plug it in and it will just go ahead and work. Now at this point, it's a good idea to swipe down from the top, and you want to make sure you have that little icon of a headset. That'll signify that the USB microphone has been connected. Now another thing we can do with the controller is customize some of the buttons. At the back here we have a C1 and C2 button, and we can change the behavior of what those buttons do. In addition, we can also customize this right scroll wheel. In order to customize the buttons, you're going to want to make sure your aircraft is powered on. The next thing we're going to do is click the three dots at the top right hand side to bring us into our main settings, and then we're going to select control there at the top, and then we're just going to scroll down until we see button customization. From there we can set the behavior of the C1 and the C2 button, but we can also use that C1 and C2 button in conjunction with the scroll wheel. For example, if we press the C1 button and use that right scroll wheel, we can adjust the EV or whatever you have it set to. And vice versa, we can do it with the C2 button as well. So it's very customizable, and you can set it to whatever makes most sense to you. Now I've already made a full video about this, but there's an option in the settings in which we can adjust the behavior of the gimbal. If we go to our settings again, go over to control, you can see here we have something called gimbal mode. By default, it's always going to be set to follow mode, and basically that's going to keep all your footage level and stable. However, we can set it to FPV mode, and what that's going to do is make your footage look more like it was captured on an FPV drone, where the horizon is tilting to the side, kind of giving you that simulation of flight. Getting nice stable footage in FPV mode does take a little bit of practice, but it can make for some really interesting content. Now the next tip here is to do with updating firmware. You may have read or seen in a forum or a Facebook post that there's some new firmware. Usually when you power on your controller, it will just automatically prompt you to update. If for some reason it doesn't, there's two ways in which we can trigger it. Again, we can go to our settings on the right hand side of the screen, go over to About. As you can see there, it says aircraft firmware, and there's a button there that says check for updates. All you have to do is click on that, and if there's any firmware updates, it will be presented to you. Another way you can check for firmware is to go back to the main page of the Fly app, click on Profile, and then we're going to click on Settings, and again at the top there you can see it says check for firmware updates. Again, if there's any updates for the Fly app or the controller, it should appear in there. And while we're on topic of firmware, just keep in mind that your batteries have firmware as well. So after you've done a firmware update on your drone, it's a good idea to power the drone off, place each battery that you own in the drone one at a time, power the drone on, and if there's firmware that needs to be transferred over to the battery, it will prompt you on the screen to do so. Now the next tip is to do with disabling sideways flight, and you might be wondering, well, why would you want to disable sideways flight? Well, it can come in handy for a few different reasons. First of all, if you're going to be flying in the FPV gimbal mode, sometimes by disabling that sideways flight can make for smoother footage. You can still move the drone forward, and when you want to turn, you just use your left control stick to bank from side to side and spin the drone around. It can also come in handy if you want to fly a straight line. It's very easy to accidentally push the gimbal off to the side while you're trying to fly straight. By disabling sideways flight, you can fly a nice straight path. If you do need to turn, again, you can just use your left control stick. And lastly, if you're a brand new pilot just learning to fly, disabling sideways flight can be a little bit safer, as there is no obstacle avoidance on the side of the drone. Again, you can use your right stick to go forward and backward, and as you want to move around up in the air, just use your left control stick to turn the drone. To enable and disable sideways flight, again, we're going to click on the three dots at the top right hand side. Under the safety tab, if we go down kind of the middle of the page, you can see we have an option for disable sideways flight. From there, we can turn it on and turn it off. Now the next tip here is to do with the map and switching between the map and the compass. If we click that icon there, you can see it brings up the map. Now to get the map accuracy, you either have to have cached your maps or be connected to Wi-Fi. And again, we can click on it to bring it full screen. But down here in the bottom right hand corner, we have this little triangle icon. If we click on that, you can see there it turns now to a compass. A lot of people like to fly with that compass enabled. Again, that all boils down to personal preference. And you can make that compass smaller by clicking that arrow down in the bottom left hand side. And again, we can make it bigger just by clicking on it. Now the next tip here is to do with the gimbal and how we can control it and how we can adjust the sensitivity of it. Of course, we all know we can use the left scroll wheel, and that will move the gimbal up and down. But we can also press and hold on the screen. And as you can see here, we can drag the gimbal up and down. Now, depending on what you're filming and how sensitive you want the gimbal, you can go in and adjust that in the settings. And to do so, we're going to click the three dots top right hand side. We're going to go to Control, and we're going to scroll down until we see Advanced Gimbal Settings. Now there's a lot of options in here, and they're not all to do with the gimbal, but what you can notice here is that we can adjust it for every flight mode. For example, you can see at the top there we have normal mode, so we can adjust the gimbal for normal mode. We can adjust it for sport mode, and we can adjust it for sin mode. Basically, the two settings we can change are the pitch speed and the pitch smoothness. The pitch speed is basically how fast it moves up and down. For example, we're in sin mode, so let's move the gimbal pitch speed all the way over to the right hand side. As we move it, you can see it moves very fast. If we slide it all the way over to the left hand side and we go back, you can see there it's barely moving now. Now the pitch smoothness is basically how quickly it comes to a stop. Again, let's put it all the way over to the right hand side. As you can see here, as we move it and I let go, you can see the gimbal is still moving because it's going to come to a slow stop to make it look a little bit more cinematic. And vice versa, if we put it all the way over to the right hand side, you'll see here, as soon as I let go of it, it comes to an abrupt stop. So you'll just have to mess around with those settings to find out what you like best, depending what mode you're in. Now don't worry about changing things if you find that you've really messed things up. At the bottom of the page is a reset button, so you can reset all the gimbal parameters if you just want to put them back to the factory defaults. Now the next tip here is to do with zooming. When recording in 4K, you can zoom to a maximum of 2 times. Now of course we can use our right scroll wheel to zoom in and out, but there's a couple other different ways we can do it. First of all, on the right hand side you can see we have a button that says 1 times. We can just click on that and it will go right into 2 times zoom. And again, we can click it to go back to 1 times. But we can also press and hold, and as you can see we get this new menu that pops up. And there we can use our finger to drag in and out to set our zoom level. The other way to do it is by using a pinch gesture on the screen. As you can see there, we can pinch in and out. Now as a new pilot, there's a few tools that we can place on our screen to help us capture better content. Again, if we go to our settings and we go to camera, the first thing you might want to do is enable grid lines. And there's a couple different types of grid line aids you can place on the screen. The one that I usually leave on the screen is a little crosshair in the middle there. You can just kind of barely see it. But another one you can do that is popular are the lines. As you can see here, we get a series of lines on the screen. And that helps if you're trying to line things up. If you're following the rule of thirds that a lot of people like to follow, it can really help line up your shots. The other is a larger X. As you can see now, we have this other X, larger X in the screen. So that's all going to boil down to personal preference. You can enable just one of them or all 3 of them. The other thing that a lot of people like to do is enable overexposure warning. You can enable that, and if anything is overexposed, you're going to get those zebra stripes on the screen. I'll see if I can recreate it here for you. There, I just turned up our EV compensation. And you can see here now, wherever it's overexposed, we get these lines signifying that it's overexposed. So as a new pilot, that can come in extremely useful. Now another little tip here is to do with focusing. It's always a good rule of thumb to tap on the screen to focus it. Most of the time, the drone, when you put it up, is going to be focused, but it doesn't always get it exactly right. Just by tapping on the screen quickly, That'll just make sure everything is properly focused. So the next tip here is to do about memory management, the internal memory built into the drone and the memory card in the drone. If we go over to our settings, click on camera, scroll down, you can see we get this option to manage our storage. From there we can switch back and forth between recording to the memory card and the internal memory. Now for the most part you're not going to want to record to the internal memory, especially if you're recording video, because it's only a little over a gigabyte, and that's going to equate to maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes of 4K footage. But if you happen to forget a memory card, it will allow you to at least take some photos. But more importantly, what you can do is format. And you can format both the internal memory and the memory card. And that comes in handy because if you want to clear everything on your memory card all at once, it's a nice, simple, quick way to do it. But it is a good idea to do every once in a while just to keep the memory card structure healthy. It can get a little sloppy over time. You sometimes get orphan files and different things like that. So all you do is click on the format button, and from there it'll ask you if you want to format the SD card or the internal storage. Now the last tip I want to share with you today is clearing cached files from the controller. After doing firmware updates, if you notice that you're getting problems with the controller, the Fly app is running a little funny, or you just need to clear up some space, we can go in and remove some of these temporary files that can build up over time. To do so, we're going to go to Profile, and then we're going to go to Settings, and then we're going to click on Storage. Then you can see here we have two different areas in which we can clear cache from. The memory card, if you have a memory card installed, but also from the built-in internal storage. So you can click on each one and it'll show you what you can clear and how much space it is using. For example, we can clear photo cache or clear album data. And you don't have to worry, you're not going to be deleting the originals off the memory card. You're going to be deleting temporary files and cached video, those low-res versions that are stored within the memory. And again, we can do the same for the RC internal storage. And here you can see we have a little bit more we can clear out. So if you're having problems or you just need to get some extra space, you can go in and safely clear out any of that. Well folks, that's basically it. Those are my tips and tricks for new pilots if you've just recently purchased the Mini 3 Pro. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. Give it a thumbs up if you did. It's always greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we'll see you in the next one.